Hey guys, welcome back to Clownfish TV. This is Kneon. We're going to dip back into the DC Comics situation. It's gone from bad to worse to worser, I guess. Apparently, a lot of DC freelancers are effectively out of a job, and nobody told them. They found out because the books they were supposed to be working on were not solicited next year. Yeah, so this is how the comic book industry works, guys. This is how the direct market works. And unfortunately, I think we're going to see a lot of DC and Marvel artists out of work, displaced in the coming months as the direct market winds down, as DC Comics winds down as a comic book publisher because of AT&T chopping everything they can chop to save as much money as they can. And they're definitely trimming the fat over at Warner Media, which of course is the parent company of DC Comics. And yeah, they frankly don't care about comic books. We're going to talk about this, and we're going to talk about what their future plans seem to be and how I don't think that's the way they're going to go anymore. It seemed like DC Comics was going to bet heavy on YA graphic novels, and they're still announcing YA graphic novel projects, but they got rid of the person in charge of those YA graphic novel projects, and they're canceling some of those projects, and now it seems like they might just be jobbing these books out to Random House and calling it a day. So before we get into it, please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants, guys. We're over 163,000 subs. Thank you so much for the support. We do talk about comics, we talk about animation, we talk about movies, video games, whatever interests us that day. And there's a lot of movement going on in comics right now, and unfortunately, as far as the mainstream comic book industry is concerned, it's not good. There's not a lot of good movement going on in the mainstream, going on in the direct market. It seems like everything's kind of sort of imploding, right? And it's not just DC. It's Marvel too. Marvel, they stopped production on several comic books earlier in the year because of the pandemic. We had Diamond Distribution shutting down for several months, which put a lot of comic shops out of business. Because of the pandemic, they basically dipped out, and I don't know what the direct market's going to look like next year. I have to wonder if it's not going to just disappear mostly, and if comic shops aren't going to maybe become like vinyl record stores where, yeah, they still make vinyl. They do. I actually got a bunch for Christmas thanks to Geeky. They do make vinyl, but it's a very niche thing. It's a collector's thing. It's not the way that most people consume music, but it's there if you want it. And the vast majority of vinyl being produced now is actually, they're actually reprints or repressings of, days gone by. I got Pink Floyd The Wall, and I got Thriller, and there are some groups that put out their albums on vinyl, but most of the vinyl you're going to find, even if it's a quote unquote new product, is actually effectively a reprint. And that's kind of what I could see happening to DC Comics, where, yeah, they put out some new material, but most of it's going to be reprints of better stuff from better days. Omnibus collections, of course, The Dark Knight Returns, Watchmen, that sort of thing will be in print forever. But yeah, it doesn't look like DC is going to do a lot of new material. We talked about all the books that are getting canceled next year, and they're really paring this line down. And it's interesting, I saw a video by Ethan Van Sciver talking about what they're doing to one of his characters. Ironically enough, that they're doing a YA graphic novel about Jessica Cruz, and it was a character he created for Green Lantern. And I don't know if these books are actually going to happen, or at least happen under the DC imprint. So yeah, this week several DC Comics creators realized they were out of work. I can't find anything else on this other than Rich Johnston. It's almost like the rest of the comic book industry wants to ignore the elephant in the room, that we are in the end days of at least DC Comics and probably the direct market. They're not covering this because it makes people sad that they wake up and this is how they find out they're out of work. And unfortunately, it is par for the course in the direct market, especially to find out that you're effectively out of a job as a freelancer when your book gets canceled and you find out through the media, or it's not solicited. This I've heard these horror stories for years. This is why I don't do a lot of work in comics right now, because it's not right. It's not right to not tell people that their livelihoods are gone, but that's how these companies roll, right? So Bleeding Cool understands that this month, a number of DC Comics writers and artists realized that their upcoming work for DC Comics may not be quite as upcoming as they thought. They discovered this in some cases by reading the DC Comics solicitations for March. The reduction in the number of titles as well as contracts being previously signed with creators who were meant to be working on the 5G line have meant that a number of creators without such contracts have been jettisoned from their titles. And with editorial numbers being decimated over the last year, it seems that whoever was meant to inform such creators of the change in the upcoming workload may not have told everybody. We're going to talk about that because, there have been 2 bloodbaths at DC Comics, and Rich Johnston is saying that there's going to be a third. There's actually going to be another bloodbath coming, which probably means more editorial and fewer titles, which means fewer creatives get jobs. Comics has always been a very spotty, haphazard industry to work in. And I'm going to be honest, and I've said this before, and I'm going to say it again, that the reason I think comics attracts some of the people that it does, and you see a lot of these people that are out there on Twitter all day long spouting off nonsense, is that the comic book industry doesn't have the money to hire like the actual professionals. Like most of the actual professionals have moved on to movies or video games or something else that pays better. And you're basically stuck with people, unfortunately, who maybe can't find work in other industries. And that sounds very harsh. It sounds very cold. But you do get a lot of people who are kind of transient workers coming into the comic book industry because, where else are they going to go? Well, they're not going to work in comics because it's shrinking. The only out at this point is probably to do your own thing, or get a book with a publisher like Random House where you have a contract and all that. We're going to talk about that. So cue a number of phone calls, email threads, and even the occasional "What's Up" shout with longtime DC creators looking for work, with a flurry of editors at Marvel, Dark Horse, IDW, Boom, and Dynamite. And they're receiving the "Hey, I'm suddenly available" messages. I expect to see a few creators who are all but known for their work at DC Comics popping up in solicitations in months to come. If those publishers make it. Here's the thing. This is going to be a domino effect. If people don't realize, all it's going to take is for Marvel or DC to pull out, and that effectively destroys the direct market. Because those shops, as nice as it is for them to carry, IDW books or Boom books, and we know IDW is in really bad shape right now. We know IDW is hanging on by their freaking fingertips. They bet everything on Netflix and Hulu, and it's not working out for them. But if Marvel or DC goes out, then so do a lot more comic shops. And if they go out, so do some of these smaller publishers. This is a chain reaction. There's not going to be a lot of places to work in comics. Really the only out at this point for those who can is to probably do your own thing. I just don't think the work for hire for a publisher that's owned by some corporation is going to be very sustainable in the coming months. Doesn't help that while DC Comics has created more anthology titles and titles with backup strips, the number of titles and the total page count of work being created has dropped dramatically. In March, DC solicited 62 new items totaling 2,600 pages, costing $281, made up of $49, $399, and $499 titles. In December, DC was soliciting 52 new items, totaling 2,300 pages, costing $286, made up of $29, $399, and 9 $499 titles. In March, DC is soliciting only 39 items, totaling 1,800 pages, costing $221, made up of 16 $399 and 12 $499 books. Dubbed "Stepping Over the Line" at $499. While other publishers have also seen reductions, DC titles have dropped by over a third in a year, and the $499 price point has jumped, and those creating that art have to find somewhere else to go. I think there needs to be some kind of contraction. I think that companies were healthier when they were producing fewer books, but those books were of better quality. And I think back to the 80s, 90s when I collected Marvel comics especially, and I could pretty much buy everything Marvel put out, with my allowance money. but the books were cheaper and there were more of them and they sold more copies per issue, but they also sold those books in like 7-Eleven and bookstores and other retail outlets. That's not the case now. This to me just sounds like DC doesn't know what the hell it's doing at this point. It's just trying to survive. You know, get rid of people. They're probably being told, get rid of people, pare things down. Okay, well, we still have to make revenue, so let's charge more per book. And this is just going to be this domino effect that eventually it's going to get to a point where, you know, AT&T and Warner Media is going to realize they really don't need an in-house comic book publisher. They own these characters. They can just outsource them, which brings me to what's going on with YA. They're already canceling titles. Now, they put out the I Am Not Starfire graphic novel teaser, which did not go well at all. And I think that book is supposed to come out in August of next year. Well, there was another book that was supposed to come out before. It was the Zatanna book. And that was supposed to come out in April. And now it's canceled. It's canceled. We don't know if they're going to take orders for it again or what, but the Zatanna book is canceled. That was one of the first of these new YA books. And part of the reason is that I think Michele Wells, who was the graphic novel proponent over at DC Comics, well, she got gone when they laid people off, the second round of layoffs. So they don't have anybody, steering the ship at this point. They just have these products sort of, in various stages of completion. And we know graphic novels, a lot of times they work a year ahead of time. So it could be that these books, like including I Am Not Starfire, are half done, but they don't come out. They might just tell them to stop production on the book because they don't want to spend the money on the art and the writing, and they don't want to spend the money on the printing and the distribution because it's not going to be worth it. But it is kind of weird to see them cancel Zatanna when they're making such a big deal about, all these YA graphic novels, including this, Jessica Cruz one, which I guess rubbed Ethan Van Sciver the wrong way, because this is not the character he created. But here's the thing. If you go back again on Bleeding Cool and start digging into it, a couple of weeks ago, and I missed this, that Random House might be publishing original DC Comics graphic novels. Is that what they're going to do? Are they going to either cancel these books altogether or use Random House to source talent, YA talent, and just let them deal with it? This was about 2 weeks ago. Bleeding Cool was made aware that DC Comics has been approached by, or has approached, probably they approached them, other publishers about the possibility of licensing DC Comics characters for their own comics. This is not uncommon these days. Marvel has an all-ages comic book line licensed and published by IDW. Now, I told you, at least on the Marvel side, that this was a possibility like 3 or 4 years ago, because I had it on pretty good authority from people at Disney Publishing Worldwide that Disney did not understand why they had to publish Marvel Comics in-house when all the other Disney books are jobbed out. And they were testing the waters with IDW. And I think if IDW had worked out, they might have just said, here, just take it all. Take all the superheroes. Unfortunately, IDW is not moving nearly as much product as Marvel does themselves. And IDW is in a really bad financial state right now. And it would not be wise for Disney to just give them the keys to all of the Marvel superheroes when they don't even know if this company is going to be in business a year from now. So Marvel's also signed with Scholastic for them to publish several titles featuring the Marvel characters, including Miles Morales and Spider-Man. Again, we're going to see the same thing happen with Marvel. Maybe not as fast. I honestly thought Marvel was going to fold before Warner, but I did not understand the severity of the AT&T situation at first. I understand this is coming from Rich Johnson. I understand that some publishers have already approached DC or have been approached and have turned down the opportunity over cost. So they're already shopping around their characters. Bleeding Cool has learned that IDW, who already licensed Star Wars and Marvel comics, found the price too onerous. They don't have any money. IDW has no money. The same goes for Dynamite, who employs several creators that would be interested in seeing them on specific DC titles. There are some DC creators on Dynamite books. While Marvel Comics themselves, who 40 years ago were approached by Warner's to take over the biggest DC Comics titles, thought the price paid wasn't worth it. They've recently bought up comic book licenses from Lucasfilm, Fox, Games Workshop, and Conan, so they're not opposed to this sort of thing. I don't think Marvel Comics is going to be around that long either, guys. Bleeding Cool has heard the word that Penguin Random House, who already exclusively distribute DC graphic novels to bookstores as well as to comic shops, and who have the figures on just how well they sell, have decided that yes, the license fee is worth it. And I'm led to expect that one of their many publishing imprints will be publishing original DC graphic novels. They've been hiring a number of staff for their graphic novel lines, with the likes of DC Comics shedding editorial staff, joining those from Oni, IDW, and more. Random House now has a pool of experienced and well-connected editorial staff they're bringing on board at comparatively low rates without having to train them. And also, Penguin Random House is buying Simon & Schuster too. So, they've got that cost too, that they're buying up Simon & Schuster. Random House already publishes children's picture books using DC characters. So yeah, they already get it for the most part. I am told to look to announcements from Random House Graphix soon, unless another imprint in the mass that is Penguin Random House steps forward to claim it. Random House Graphix, a relatively new imprint from Random House Children's Books, state they have a mission to put a graphic novel on the bookshelf of every child and YA reader. In that Random House Graphix, they are committed to championing the creativity and diversity of our authors by developing high-quality, unforgettable books. So here we go. Now we're starting to see stuff like this. I Am Not Starfire, the Zatanna book, the Jessica Cruz book. Are they canceling these at DC, and are they going to publish them at Random House later? Or are they canceling them and just letting Random House handle it altogether? Or was this a sales pitch? Like, here's what your line could look like, Random House. If you pay this license fee, you could get books like this. Wouldn't these books sell well to librarians? That's probably the thought process here. But whatever's going on, it's not good for creators. Because, especially in the graphic novel market, there is so little space. They only publish so many books a year. Even Scholastic Graphix, everybody talks about, Graphix is a place to be. Do you have any idea how few people actually get their books picked up at Graphix? I mean, they only publish a handful of books a year. First Second only publishes a handful of books a year, and a lot of times they plan their lines out years ahead of time. They buy a book today, it might not hit the bookstores until 3 years from now, 4 years from now. That's just how it works. And there's not going to be a lot of room. It's not going to be like when you had 50, 60 books a month at DC Comics and there was plenty of work for whoever was qualified or connected enough to have it. So this is definitely the end game, the end stage right now of DC Comics as we've known it. And the domino effect is going to be that the rest of the comic book industry will probably collapse around it within the next year or two. At least as we've known it. I mean, graphic novels will go on. Manga will definitely go on and do well. But, DC Comics and those characters, it's definitely changing, guys. Everything is changing. Do your own stuff. Gonna wrap this up. Please subscribe for more pop culture news, views, and rants. We'll talk later.